What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of On the Break. We have a good one coming to you. And today we are continuing our series of team previews for this upcoming season. The next team that we have are the Indiana Pacers. So, Trevon, the Indiana Pacers finished with a record of 35-47 last year. They did not make the play-in tournament, but they are looking to try and make a push for that this upcoming season. They went out, got a guard and Bruce Brown, who they feel is going to be a really big help towards their team in many different ways. And they have a lot of young talent. They just extended their star point guard and Tyrese Halliburton. And of course, a lot of people talk about Benedict Mathurin. But Trevon, what are your thoughts on the Indiana Pacers going into this upcoming season?
I think that the Pacers have had a pretty bright offseason. So the Indiana Pacers, like you mentioned, did extend Tyrese Halliburton. That is the guy that is going to be their franchise player. He has proven himself to be worthy of that contract. He just had his first All-Star season, and I believe that they have pieces around them. Now, when I look at this team, I see them similar as to being able to have a breakout season similar to how the Sacramento Kings did. Just a lot of young talent, guys that can play off of other players, your star players, similar to how they had with De'Aaron Fox. You have veteran presence there with Miles Turner, similar to how the Kings had Sabonis at that center big man spot, Buddy Hield. There's been a lot of questions about, are they going to trade those two players? What are they going to do with them? That's a question we'll have to get the answer to in the middle of the season, see if they play them out. You have a lot of younger guys that were a little bit under the radar, like Andrew Nembhard, who had a lot of bright moments last season. If you can bring all of those pieces together and get the best out of each of them, then you have a pretty good roster, in my opinion, which is why I would compare them similar to the Sacramento Kings as far as their potential. They've had some expectations of making it to the playoffs or winning the play-in and getting themselves a postseason chance, and they have not been able to reach that success point yet. But when you bring in a guy like Bruce Brown, who just won an NBA championship, is very great playing off of other players. We've seen him back in Brooklyn with Kevin Durant and Kyrie. He was more of like a big man, short roll floater type player. And last postseason with the Denver Nuggets, we saw Bruce Brown take on like a point guard role. That's a lot of versatility that can help your team if you're Indiana Pacers. He can play off of people. He is a willing player, willing defender. He can be all over the place, do multiple things for you. He's a competitor, first off, but he's also very savvy, smart with the game of basketball, has a lot of skill. Also, Obi Toppin coming from the New York Knicks, he is a guy that I feel with a lot more opportunity and with the right situation. Once again, playing off of people, you have the players that can create, play make, and get you into advantage opportunities. Obi Toppin, with the athlete that he is, if he's in a position where all he needs to do is just finish the ball, rebound, hustle, things of that nature, you're looking at a player that could be similar to Aaron Gordon as far as just being put in spots where he could be most successful, in my opinion. Probably a little bit different style, but both freakish athletic players that just need to put the ball in the basket, can rise straight up and play off of other players. So I think this team has a lot of potential. I see them for sure making the play-in and having a pretty good opportunity to make the playoffs, as the bottom of the Eastern Conference typically is not as strong as the top of the Eastern Conference. You have your four teams or your three teams, and then teams like Cleveland and the rest of the Eastern Conference kind of plays itself out. But I think Indiana can really put themselves in a pretty good space and opportunity to get into that postseason and make some noise, similar to how the Kings did last season.
That is really interesting that you feel that way, because I was not thinking that. But to your credit, not too many people were expecting the Sacramento Kings to do what they did this past season. So that would be something to keep an eye on. I really do believe in Tyrese Halliburton. I think he's going to be one of the top guards in the NBA in the future. Of course, you still have the top guards now, but towards the future, I feel like he can be a top 10, top possibly maybe even a top 5 guard.
And to speak to
Definitely,
that,
huh?
I'm sorry. And to speak to that, the Kings were not good defensively at all. Neither were the Pacers. So I feel like they could have a similar way as they get in. I know the Western Conference was very fluky, a very weird year in the Western Conference, but I feel like the Indiana Pacers do have a similar makeup. Not the same exact style of players or explosiveness. You know, you have De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, and then a whole bunch of guys that could just shoot the lights out. But I feel like the Pacers do have pieces with veteran presence that they have brought over and have on that roster. And they're in the Eastern Conference. So I do see a upside. I'm not saying that's their floor, but I do see a possibility for them to have a similar breakout. And maybe not the 4 seed like the Kings were, but to make the playoffs and have an opportunity.
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't really thinking that. I definitely felt that they could make a jump in and make it to the play in, possibly get the eighth seed if things are clicking. But I don't know. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that, especially with Benedict Mathurin coming into his own. We all saw him in the summer league. He was one of the better players during that time, one of the best players on the floor at each and every game he played. And it does seem like he's continuing to get better. One of those athletic guys that can do a lot on the floor and really put the ball in the basket as well. He had a really good rookie season last year also. And he was also in the running for rookie of the year a lot of that year as well. Paolo Banchero ended up getting it, but there were a lot of talk about Benedict Mathurin being rookie of the year last year as well. So, that is definitely one of the teams that I was thinking is going to make a jump. I just wasn't thinking that they would make that big of a jump. But with players like Miles Turner, we already mentioned Tyrese Halliburton, and with Bruce Brown coming over, bringing that championship pedigree, I can see them making it into the eighth seed and making an improvement from last year. So that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And then also you have to think about they do have that possibility of flipping Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Having trade assets like that where a lot of you could find a pretty good amount of suitors. We saw teams whispering and being thrown into the mix as far as making a deal happen. I do feel like one of them at least would get moved at some point. And we just mentioned all the talent that they have. So you're not going to have a major drop off as far as not having guys that can possibly fill that role. But you do have an opportunity to get return assets. We don't know if they would go for draft capital, depending on how the year is going, or if they actually want to bolster this roster as far as filling in the pieces that they need. Maybe they need a defender or whatever they feel that they need. They do have that certain aspect that they can bring value, extra value to their team.
Yeah, there actually have been reports or articles that I've read that have talked about Buddy Hield and trade conversations. They've already been in contact with some teams or are looking to get in contact with teams about a Buddy Hield trade. What they will get back, not exactly sure at this moment, but you called it. There is a possibility there, and even if they don't trade Buddy Hield, I feel like Buddy is a really valuable piece. He's a great shooter, and I think you can always have room for that on your team. It's definitely something to keep an eye on, especially moving forward. Like you said, they can get pieces for this year or probably draft compensation for future years. And no, I do really like this team. I feel like Tyrese Halliburton is going to continue to make a step forward. He played this summer with the U.S. team, and I think that is probably going to be a really good experience for him moving forward and in development. Benedict Mathurin, we already talked about him, how well he has been improving his game in the summer league. Obviously, Bruce Brown is going to bring that winning mentality and honestly a lot of versatility to the team. I think a lot of people don't look at Bruce Brown as a guy that can score, but he has a lot of different ways that he can score. He shoots the ball pretty good. He has that floater in the mid range, and he can handle the ball and get your team into an offense. And obviously, we already know what he does on the defensive end. So he does a lot of things, and of course, Miles Turner being that rim protector and protecting the paint. So this team is going to be a really interesting young team that could make some noise this upcoming season, most definitely.
Yeah, and just to reinforce, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying fourth seed or anything like that, but if they make noise, like you said, in the playoffs, if they're one of the teams that are on fire and you get a lot of people to turn their heads, I wouldn't be surprised. Probably going on the limb a little bit, I guess, but I do
Yeah,
see I do see some similarities as far as young talent and having an opportunity to make a jump and do some good things with the roster that they got.
yeah, I see it max. They'll get the eighth seed and have to play in the play in.
Mhm.
Just looking at the teams ahead of them, I can see the Bulls or the Toronto Raptors dropping out
That's
and
exactly what I was
them.
looking at.
Yeah, I can see them dropping out and then maybe the Indiana Pacers or the Orlando Magic like getting one of those spots. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't see them getting any higher than the AC though. But yeah, hey, who knows? Maybe they do make a crazy run. Like you said, you're not expecting them to, make as big of a jump that the Sacramento Kings made to the fourth seed. But it is something to look out for, and definitely one of
Yeah.
those things that could be really cool. Oh no, actually, the Sacramento Kings made it to the third seed. My bad.
Oh, they did
But
make it to the third seed. Yeah, not
yeah,
third seed. But if you're looking at the conference, that's exactly what I was looking at. Obviously, Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, Cleveland. You would say Cleveland. New York, we don't know what kind of year they would have. We know that the way that they play would get them a decent seed just because of how hard they play throughout the regular season. So you could expect them to be above the play-in, but they tend to show a lot of flaws, especially offensively. Also, Brooklyn, we don't know exactly how real this is as far as their offensive creation or just the players that they have. Miles Bridges is still coming into his own. How much of a number one is he truly?
Mikhail.
Things. I'm sorry, I said Miles. Mikal Bridges, and then Atlanta. We're not exactly sure. They've had things going on with them. Miami, we would expect them to get back to regular Miami basketball and actually having a good regular season. Chicago still doesn't have Lonzo Ball. They still who was it? I think Vucevic even said this might be the last go round for their core players. Toronto, Fred Van Vliet is gone, had a rough patch last year. Scotty Barnes had regressed. That's not a big concern, really, but just things going on in Toronto. And then we're expecting Orlando to jump, but will they truly make a jump? So I feel like the window is there. And then the rest of the team is Washington, Charlotte, and Detroit. I think there's an opportunity for them to at least be in the play-in. I would at least expect them to be in the play-in. So I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck into the top six either. That's just how I view it.
Okay. No, yeah, like I said, I see them being at the highest, the AC, and that might, for me, that might be even a little bit of a stretch, but I can see them getting the ninth or the 10th seed. Um, I think the only three teams that didn't make the play in last year that have a chance are the Indiana Pacers, the Washington Wizards, and the Orlando Magic in the East. They'll be a team to look out for. They usually tend to put out really competitive teams, especially back in the day, even dating back to obviously the Reggie Miller days, but even the Miami Heat days when LeBron was there, they put out teams with Paul George. And after that, when they went through that little transition period, they had players like Victor Oladipo, who led their teams to playoff runs and things like that. So, it's definitely possible.